Hey arbitare, I'm Emma and Emma loves horror. Let's talk about The Conference, aka Konferensen. Spoilers ahead. The Conference is a 2023 slasher satire and it comes from the writer-director Patrick Eklund. I've not seen much of Patrick Eklund's other works. The only piece I've actually seen is Syndromeda, which is a really bizarre short. It's very good. You can watch it on YouTube. I definitely recommend checking it out. It's a real mix of genres. But this is the first feature-length film of his that I've seen, and I think he's only done 2 feature-length films that were made for theatrical release. And this is Patrick's first foray into horror. All of his previous works seem to tug at the line between drama and comedy, so I'm not surprised that this movie tugs at the lines between horror and comedy. It definitely feels like a horror comedy through and through, but not in a laugh out loud way or in a slapstick kind of way. It's very tongue-in-cheek satire, smart, quippy, witty, and these undercurrents of political and social commentary, which are just very amusing to watch. As with most satire that doesn't originate from my home country, which is England, there are probably some references and specific digs at Swedish politics, Swedish economy, Swedish social life that I won't get, but the messages about capitalism, consumerism, gentrification, corporate greed and corruption, anti-environmentalism, commercialization, this is all very transferable. Eklund is the writer-director behind the script, but he can't get all of the credit because this is a work adapted from a novel by Matt Strandberg. I haven't read the novel, so I can't speak to how similar they are, but it does seem like quite a straightforward narrative, and all of the characters seem fairly well defined, if occasionally a little 1 or 2 dimensional. Not all of them, some of them are really well fleshed out, and these are the characters that we get to know much better throughout the course of the film. I wouldn't say that the concept is entirely unique. This definitely feels a lot like the British horror film Severance, if anyone's seen that, which is also about a group of people going on a work retreat only to be hunted down and picked off one by one. The main crew that we're following are a team of workers from a company which is looking to set up a shopping centre, and they're away on a work retreat, a professional development training weekend. And then we have a couple of other side characters who are the staff at the retreat. But the characters all feel like people that you've met in real life, especially if you've spent much time in a workplace, people that you'd meet around the office. I definitely felt like even with characters that were more 1 or 2 dimensional, I was still feeling, some of that humour. I was still feeling some of that joy and that relatability, watching them just going, oh yes, I've totally met this guy, I totally know this woman. These are people that exist in every workplace environment. And this premise is just funny from its outset. These people who don't really like themselves or like their jobs or like each other suddenly have to actually learn how to do team building and cooperation because they are literally fighting for their lives. The 9 of the main corporate retreat, we do get a real sense of their personalities. We do get a sense of their different beliefs, their different approaches to work, and their different roles within the company. So the boss of the corporate crew who've come on this retreat is Ingela. She's very aggressive, she's very pro the development of this new shopping mall, and she's really proud of Jonas, who is the one who is presenting the project. He's the project manager, and he's clearly very ambitious, very ruthless. He really wants to climb that corporate ladder, and he has the support of his lackey Kai, who is obsessed with him, thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. Then we have other characters who are less supportive of Jonas and Ingela and Kai, Amir and Nadia, who are a little bit more critical of the promotional material that they're doing, of the finances that don't seem to be quite working out, the contract disputes, the presentation that they deliver, which offers very little racial diversity, the general upset that the community is experiencing at the idea of this new shopping mall being created. They're a lot more concerned with the people's concerns than Ingela and Jonas and Kai are. And then we have Eva and Torbjorn, who are a little bit older, a little bit more reserved in the meetings, but they are great comic relief through the rest of the film. Then we have Arnetta, who is really much more environmentally concerned. However, she is still working for this project, she's still working for this company. And then finally, and most importantly, we have Lina, who has just come back to work from sick leave. And other people are a little bit cagey with her, they're a little bit sensitive towards her, they're not sure quite how she's going to respond to certain things. Some people push her buttons, some people are more respectful, but she is confused because there are contracts and disputes which seem to be signed by her that she doesn't recall signing and that she thinks have been forged, which they have, she's right. But she's quite an interesting character, so seeing them on the team building retreats, for example, as well, seeing how the people either goad her or make fun of her or mock her, but actually she's a very strong character. She's just been dealing with a lot of personal issues. Most of the first act is quite slow. It's building up these quirky characters, it's introducing us to this very beautiful setting in the forest. We see some hints of what's to come with certain traps being set up by the killer in the forest. It's about what's happening with this shopping centre, these fractions that are happening within the company itself, these disagreements, these concerns, these outright lies that are coming out, the fact that they've said they have IKEA attached to the project but actually they don't, the fact that they said that they promised money to the farmers whose land they were taking, but actually they haven't offered it anymore because the farmer has killed himself, so they're not going to offer any money anymore to the family. We also get a lot of actual team building activities, and what was fun about seeing the team building activities is that all of the team building activities later came back when they are actually fighting the killer off later on. They end up going back to a lot of the activities that they were doing, the zip wire, the what would you bring to a desert island game, building rafts out of water bottles. The murders don't really start until the second act, when the retreat staff are picked off pretty quickly, one by one. The murders, straight from the beginning though, are pretty violent and quite gory, which is always going to get a thumbs up from me. But you do tend to get cutaways quite quickly or more allusions to the gore. It does get a little bit creative. There are some interesting tools used. The murderer does not seem invincible. They're wearing this giant mask, which is both quite comical and quite creepy. It's a mask a bit like the baby face mask from Happy Death Day, but it's actually belongs to Jonas at the company. He wants to wear it at the opening of the construction site. So this big generic child face kind of, it seems like a symbolism thing about, you know, the kind of the face of consumerism or commercialization, this very generic, plastic, artificial, uncanny, overly happily smiling face, which is just, it's just a little bit weird. As the murderer keeps wearing it and keeps getting fought back against, it gets bloodier and dirtier, you know, people throwing bottles and objects through its eye holes, but it also acts as a very effective shield against the murderer, which again seems symbolic in terms of the fight against consumerism or commercialization. And it's just a nice irony that the killer opts to choose the company's own face as his mask while he's going about on his rampage, like literally donning the face of evil. I liked it. Because of all the information we get in the first act, we know why the murders are happening pretty early on. Even if we don't know who the precise culprit is, it's very obvious the reasons why this is happening. We know that the people don't want this shopping mall to be built in their community. They don't want it in their area. The brands are not wanting to be part of the shopping mall either. The retreat itself is one of the only places in the area that would actually take on this company for their retreat, because everywhere else had declined their offer. They didn't go, all companies are evil. They did go specifically like, there is a choice, all companies have a choice whether to participate or in these practices or not. A little bit more nuance to the discussion rather than it just being kind of a flat out, you know, everyone is evil. Especially when we layer that with how people within the company that we're looking at, some of them are trying to make a difference or trying to make a change, some harder than others. But then how far do we judge them for being part of the company anyway, even if they're trying to make a difference or trying to make things better? This is particularly explored with the character of Arnetta, who is friends with an environmentalist who they actually think is the killer. She's friends with this person and she says she's tried really hard to get the company to make better decisions and change what it's doing, but she hasn't been able to make that impact. And we've only seen a little bit of her character, so we don't know to what extent that's true. But at the same time, she's still working for this company, which is doing the thing that she's supposedly against. So it's just interesting. From the killer's perspective, the fact that these people work at the retreat where they've accepted this company to come in, that's why they're acceptable collateral damage to him. That's why they all get killed off, because it was kind of an implicit acceptance of what they're doing to the community. And then he doesn't care about the individual motivations of the people that operate within the company that wants to build the shopping mall. He holds them all collectively responsible for this project and for what's happening. One thing that I do want to point out is that this movie is yet another in the tranche of movies that have come out post maybe 2007, which has had to address the cell phone problem. Why don't characters call for help? Why don't characters call police? So I think they did this one pretty well. They did it in a different way than the standard, oh, we're out in the middle of nowhere, so we don't have service, as though that actually happens that often now. It does still happen. I mean, I lived in a house for 7 years which had terrible service. I do appreciate when a movie tries to think around the problem in a more inventive way, and I do think they did it in a fun way with this one, where they all had to give up their phones before they did some of the team building activities, so that they're disconnecting from the outside world. But then the killer steals their phones. The staff at the retreat then panic because they think they've lost these people's phones, and then the people on the retreat are annoyed, but part of them are like, oh, this is a test, this is part of the team building. I thought it was handled pretty well. So after all of the staff at the retreat are dead, the company retreaters have not noticed, just blame it on poor customer service, which again is quite funny. But then the murderer starts coming for the rest of the company. The bodies start to really pile up. Some of the deaths are pretty creative, pretty gruesome, pretty gory. Some of them are a little bit more amusing. Some of them are a lot more chilling. And by this point in the film, I did find myself really starting to care about certain characters and what happened to them. Likewise, there were certain characters where I was kind of looking forward to them being sliced and diced. I really did want Lena to make it out. I really did want Jonas to get his comeuppance. It is funny seeing how the characters react to this new situation, whether they kind of submit to it, whether they're just completely oblivious or in denial about it, whether they choose to hide, whether they choose to fight. It all seems very cohesive with the characters' development and the characters that we've seen from the inception of the story. It does seem quite well thought out. Like I said, the gore is good. There is a couple of really squirm-inducing sequences, like Jonas gets sliced across his head and he starts pulling at the wound. It's really gross. And then someone sews it up, which is even more pain. So I enjoyed those sequences. And I also enjoy how the murderer employed traps and had clearly done so much planning to try and keep the people within the company retreat, stop them from escaping. And it does result in some really sad deaths when you think a character has been smart and then you realise that the murderer has also had that idea and has prepared for that eventuality. So like with Lena and Amir when they use the zip line to get across the lake, but the murderer has rigged the other end of the zip line with spikes, which then kills Amir. And it's really sad. He sacrifices himself for Lena and I felt really bad for him. Nadia also is fantastic in these action sequences. She is a real fighter. She picks up various different weapons. She's not afraid to kick back and she really wants to help other people get out. she's the one that's like, right, let's make a run for it, let's go to the car, let's go, I'll go first. She's very much a go-getter and a go get in there and let's do this. Eva and Torbjorn are very good hiders, and they are good, they you know, they are sensible about it, they think things through, they build barricades, even if they are screaming and running around and crying and feeling a bit like headless chickens. No one in this movie is just downright stupid, which is quite unusual for a slasher, and most of the characters are likable after the first few deaths, so we're rooting for a lot more of the characters to survive. The only unlikable character that we're really following in the third act is Jonas. And then as we get into this final act, we get the fake out reveal of the killer, where Annetta apologizes to the environmentalist that she thinks is behind the mask, but then meets her demise when she realizes that it's not the environmentalist that she thought it was, and it's someone else who's after them all. We think something bad has happened to Nadia, but it does turn out that she's okay, hooray. Jonas has just straight up made a run for it. He's just out running through the fields, and everyone else is just trying to kill the killer at this point, or get access to a phone. But there's a good action sequence for the final attack of the killer, and then Nadia, surprise, she's not dead, she comes back and whoosh, decapitates him. And what was really interesting is that even after the killer's death, when they then reveal who it really is, which is the son of the farmer who killed himself at the beginning of the film, whose land it was that they were building the shopping mall on, they still don't actually reveal his face. We just see the mask on the floor and this headless body, but we didn't ever actually see the killer's face. I thought it was a really interesting choice, kind of that it didn't really matter who it was, because he was kind of representative of the community in general. So just as the mask was this kind of generic face of consumerism and commercialization, once he's dead, he's also a kind of generic figurehead. Once the killer was dead, I was surprised to realize that there was quite a chunk of movie left, because I was thinking, you know, that the killer would die, police would arrive, and that would be it. But no, there's just this extra bit at the end which just pipped this movie a little bit higher for me, which is that Lena comes across Jonas making a run for it, and they then fight, the two of them. They've been at loggerheads this entire time, they don't get along, he forged her signature, he was rude to her, she does not trust him, she does not like him, he's the project manager, and he's just extremely corrupt. There's this final fight where you kind of realise, oh my god, she's going to kill him. And she does. And it's just such a interesting ending. This murderous rampage can be totally used as an excuse for her to off this guy who is the last remaining element of the corporate greed and corporate evil in their team. So she kills him and probably gets away with it. I like it. I thought it was fun. My overall opinion is that this is a decent slasher. I know I've said a lot of times, you know, I thought this was fun, I liked this was interesting, and that's all true, but I still think there were areas where it could have been pushed further. I think it's, like I say, it's a premise that we have sort of seen before. There have been quite a number of different takes on anti-consumerism and these sort of social satires, so it doesn't feel very original in that sense. The deaths, I think there are a couple that I will remember, so that's something that does give it a little bit of extra from me. I thought the twist reveal of who the killer really was incredibly obvious. I had that pegged from the beginning. Like I said, I don't think it totally matters, because I don't think it really matters who was actually behind it, because that's not really the point of the story. The revenge aspect is all you really need to know, and you know it's going to be some kind of revenge. But at the same time, I was kind of waiting for more of a twist, and I feel like that the real twist is actually that ending where Lena kills Jonas, and like I say, I do enjoy that. In terms of the direction, I don't think it's anything overwhelmingly brilliant, but I don't think it's anything overwhelmingly terrible either. I feel like a lot of the choices made, particularly in the death scenes, were done really well. I think the action was shot well. But I do think the first half of the movie was quite slow and probably could have been bumped up with some slightly tighter script work and some slightly more interesting directorial choices. I think it could have been a bit slicker, even though this is a short film. I think it could have been tighter and slicker in that first act, just to kind of get the ball rolling a little bit faster, because it felt like they did a huge amount of exposition. It would have been nice if there was a way for that exposition to be kind of drip thread through the movie a little bit more, so there was a bit more of a kind of mystery feel to it, and the action was a little bit more spread out, because it kind of felt like it was exhibition, murders, twist, but not really, because you could figure out that that wasn't really that much of a twist, and then more murders, ending. So it just felt a little bit too straightforward and a bit too spoon-fed for me. I did like the characters. I would like to, if a couple more of them had a little bit more of a 3D edge, mostly actually in the unlikable characters. I felt like the likable characters had more of those layers to them, but Jonas and Ingela and Kai, they did feel a little bit, just a little bit flat. I wanted them to have more layers, so these characters didn't feel so kind of one-dimensionally evil corporate. On the whole, in my personal rankings, I give this one a 3 out of 5, I think is fair. Yeah, 3 out of 5. It's decent, it's fun. I don't regret watching it at all, but will I probably watch it again? I don't know, maybe. In terms of my recommendation-based system, I don't always like to use stars. But in the recommendation system, I say this is a watch when. Watch when you fancy watching something that is Scandinavian horror. Watch when you're in the mood for a slasher. Watch when you're in the mood for a satire. I think all of those things play, but if you're not particularly into any of those 3 things, then this probably isn't the movie for you. It is gory enough to get the stamp of brutal, so that is something about it as well. If you're in the mood for something a little bit gory, this does have that on offer. So that's The Conference 2023. I'll be back soon. Ciao for now.